There was a particular kind of silence in the Citadel War College lecture dome, the kind that came from 1,000 years of consensus. James Halley heard it every time a professor mentioned primitive warfare, with a knowing smile, or when an alien cadet, some silicon-based horror with 4 degrees and subatomic siegecraft, waved a tendril dismissively and said, "Kinetic weapons? You mean the ones with exploding metal pellets?" He never corrected them. Not when they called bullets cave tech, or said gunpowder was basically spicy sand. He just sat near the back, jotting notes with his left hand and quietly sketching wind vectors with his right. The others wielded rifles that could bend light and carve holes in titanium. James had brought a bolt-action M40, chambered in .308 Winchester, wrapped in oilcloth and respect. He hadn't even unpacked it yet. The professor, an orb-shaped Chirac named Lectrin, was midway through a sweeping lecture on post-energy warfare theory when he paused, squinted at James's tablet, and said, "Cadet Halley, you appear to be modeling something with air resistance?" A few cadets snickered. One made a soft pff noise with his throat sac. James looked up. "Yes, sir. Ballistics." More laughter. A Solari cadet 2 rows down whispered loudly, "He still thinks mass is a weapon." James smiled faintly. Not like he was amused, more like he was measuring something. Let them laugh. Demonstration day was tomorrow. The Citadel wasn't just the most prestigious military institution in the galaxy, it was also its most stubborn. Built into the side of a hollowed-out moon orbiting Yag-Vul Prime, the War College trained future commanders, tacticians, and diplomats from over 90 sapient species. Its gravity was custom-tuned to neutral, its atmosphere dynamically blended, and its halls swarmed with multilingual AI assistance bots shaped like friendly metallic orbs. Nothing about it was human. James got used to being stared at. Most humans didn't make it past the application process, let alone the entrance psychometric trials. You had to be fluent in 9 tactical dialects, score in the upper percentile for decision calculus, and pass a physical regimen designed for beings with 3 hearts or distributed nervous systems. James had barely made it, but he had made it. He kept to himself in the first few weeks, speaking only when addressed, answering questions with clean, clipped phrases, and training alone in the campus's auxiliary range, which no one else used because it didn't accommodate photonic targeting arrays. He brought a duffel bag, some paper targets, and an ancient bipod. The alien cadets watched from a distance the first few times. They assumed he was just nostalgic, homesick, maybe, or posturing. It didn't matter. Then came the classes. In Battlefield Systems Integration, he asked why all standard-issue shielding tech was tuned only for thermal and radiant energy absorption. No one answered. In Command Simulation IV, he routed an entire virtual mechanized battalion using topography and wind layer data to mask 3 sniper units. The simulation AIs crashed twice, trying to account for it. In History of Strategic Doctrine, he asked why the Citadel skipped over Earth's 20th and 21st century wars. Professor Lectrin responded, "That period of chaos was deemed culturally unimportant. The use of chemical propellants was considered regressive." James nodded politely. But that night, he spent 3 hours cleaning the M40 in his quarters. Every piece of the bolt, every thread of the barrel. He did it methodically, like a ritual. He wasn't angry. He was preparing. That's when Vexel came knocking. Vexel was a Polari tall, coral-hued, with bioluminescent spots that shifted based on emotion. He was also the only cadet who sat next to James in any lecture. "I have a question," Vexel said, standing awkwardly at the threshold of James's room. James looked up from the rifle, suppressing a sigh. "Yeah? That object, your artifact, it's a projectile weapon?" "It's a rifle." "And it throws what, metal?" "Copper-jacketed lead, usually." Vexel blinked. His spots flickered a soft violet. "Is that effective?" James tapped the rifle's scope. "Depends how well you use it." "Would it work against shielding?" "If the shield's designed for energy and not kinetic transfer?" James tilted his head. "Then yes, it works very well." There was a pause. Vexel's glow shifted to a pale blue. "I don't understand. Why use something so primitive? Why not plasma? Or gravitic pressure?" James leaned back. "You ever been in a sandstorm?" "I was born underwater." "Right. Well, imagine something too small to track, too fast to dodge, and too simple to jam. Then imagine it coming at you from a place you didn't even know someone could hide." Vexel stared at the M40. That sounds terrifying. James gave a small nod. It is. When demonstration day was announced, the dome's energy buzzed with anticipation. Each cadet had to select a weapon system native to their homeworld, then perform a live simulation using it in combat conditions. The goal wasn't destruction, it was doctrine. Which culture could demonstrate superior application of force, precision, and adaptability? It was graded, heavily. Most of the class prepped with glee. Cadets lugged in crate-sized plasma casters, coil rifles with anti-personnel burst mods, and sleek Neuralink weapons that required biometric attunement. The hangar smelled like ozone and self-confidence. James came last. His rifle was in a hard case, lined with foam. He carried it like it mattered, not like it was part of a show. No announcements, no display. Just him, the rifle, and a small pouch of brass casings. Cadets nudged each other. Several laughed aloud. One of the instructors, Commander Surash, leaned toward Professor Lectrin and muttered, "He's joking, right? That's an antique." Lectrin said nothing, just scribbled a note on his datapad. James waited. The order was alphabetical. That put him near the end. He watched 22 simulations before it was his turn. Flashy weapons, dazzling shields, drones torn apart mid-air by swarms of autonomous plasma darts. He never flinched. Vexel, seated on the bench behind him, tapped his shoulder. "Your turn is soon." "I know." "Are you nervous?" "No. You should be." James glanced back, and for the first time, smiled. "I know." He stepped up onto the platform with a quiet kind of focus. No bravado, just unrolled a small mat, unscrewed the hard case, and lifted the M40 into the light. The hangar's noise dulled. No hum of power cores, no glow of energy capacitors. Just metal, wood, glass, oiled parts, and patient engineering. One of the cadets snorted. "That looks like a museum piece." James ignored it. He chambered around, adjusted the scope, and waited for the drone to deploy. Standard test drone, zigzag flight pattern, randomized altitude jumps, shield calibrated to absorb 500 joules of thermal impact. Useless against 308 if the shot was right. He knelt, breathed, let the world quiet around him. The drone zipped out of its launch chute. James fired once. The rifle cracked like thunder, sharp, physical, and alien to the soft hiss of plasma that had preceded it. The drone spun mid-air, twitched, then fell like a puppet with its strings cut. Dead center, core processor shot clean through. No heat signature, no charge flare, no optical trail. Just a supersonic slug and a sudden end. No one spoke. The instructors stared. Vexel whispered, "That shouldn't be possible." James stood up, flipped the bolt, and caught the spent casing in his palm. "It is." He stepped down, leaving the mat rolled neatly and the drone still smoking on the floor. They ran diagnostics on the drone. Twice. The first analysis claimed equipment failure. The second admitted impact trauma through the processor housing. The projectile had entered cleanly through a seam in the frontal alloy and stopped just short of the drone's rear casing. No shrapnel, no collateral damage. Only a single, smooth channel of destruction. James didn't speak as the instructors hovered around the drone, muttering, scanning, recalibrating their assumptions. He had already returned the M40 to its case. Didn't clean it, didn't gloat. He sat back down and drank water, one deliberate sip at a time. Vexel stared at him. "How did you account for the lift current in the chamber?" "Rangefinder, guesswork, experience." "That's not a valid targeting protocol." James wiped the sweat from his brow. "You're right, it's just the right one." The silence after that was long and taut, the kind that made instructors check their notes like they might be flawed, and made cadets exchange glances like something sacred had just been mocked by physics. "Explain it," Lectrin demanded, an hour later. The class had reassembled in the primary debrief theater. The drone wreckage hovered in a containment field, rotating slowly for all to see. James stood in front of the holographic overlay, one hand resting on the edge of the display terminal. He didn't look smug. He looked tired. "I'll start simple," he said. "This is a bolt-action rifle. Fires a single round, no auto-feed, no energy capacitors, just powder, primer, bullet. Muzzle velocity around 2,600 feet per second. It's not new. It's reliable." A Rilthian cadet clicked its claws against the armrest. But how does it work so well? That drone was shielded against radiant energy. Kinetic shielding requires different materials, heavier mass, and more power draw. Most field units skip it to stay agile. But why a bullet? James inhaled once, slow. Then he tapped the screen. The hologram changed, now a human kneeling in muck, draped in camouflage netting. The image was old, grainy, a still pulled from a 21st century Earth conflict. It showed a sniper mid-action, rifle braced, eyes steady, body half submerged in a flooded field. "This man sat here for 3 days," James said. "Didn't eat, didn't sleep, just waited for one opportunity, one shot. He stopped a convoy, broke a siege, saved 1,000 people by ending one life." Another tap. Now it showed ballistic tables, wind shear models, charts that plotted the curve of a bullet through changing pressure layers. James gestured calmly. "Terrain, weather, distance, these all matter. Energy weapons don't care about air density, but a bullet does, and so do we." He paused, looked up. "That's what makes the difference. Humans adapt, not just in tech, but in patience. We can stay still in Arctic snow for days, or crawl through jungle for miles on our bellies, just to earn one moment." A Gralkin cadet shook his head. "That's barbaric." James met his gaze. "No, it's precise." After class, no one spoke to him for several minutes. Then came the swarm. "Is it true your species use those things in global conflicts? How does it not overheat? Wait, it recoils? The gun hits you back?" James answered patiently, showed the casing, let one cadet hold it. Kren, a gaunt Korthan with too many limbs and a nervous tick, sniffed at the casing. "It smells like oil and salt." "Gunpowder residue," James said, "and cleaning solvent." Kren blinked both sets of eyes. "Fascinating. I hated it." James nodded. "Most people do. First time." One cadet, the Oligari, a 6-foot plasma fanatic named Varric, chuckled, then cracked his knuckles. "All right, Terran, that was cute. But a one-shot trick doesn't prove much." James raised an eyebrow. "Want to find out?" Varric grinned. "Challenge. Timed shootout. Me with my autocaster, you with your stick." Vexel sputtered. "That's not wise." James said nothing, just looked at the instructors. "Approved?" Commander Surash frowned, but nodded. "As long as safety protocols are followed." The arena was quieter this time. Fewer cheers, more staring. Each cadet had 5 targets: random movement, random height, and speed. The challenge: hit all 5 as fast and accurately as possible. Varric stepped up first. His autocaster hummed to life, sleek and chrome and pulsing with internal light. The buzzer sounded. His plasma bursts lit the air with searing color. 2 drones fell in the first burst. Third took a second volley. Then the weapon glowed too bright, whined once, and shut down. "Overheat protocol," the announcer said over the loudspeaker. "Cooldown required." Varric snarled, shaking his arm. "Stupid safety subroutines." 3 out of 5, the announcer added. Then came James. He didn't stretch, didn't psych himself up, just stepped into place, lowered himself onto one knee, adjusted for chamber airflow, and waited. Buzzer. Crack. Pause. Crack. Again. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, 4 seconds between each. The final drone dropped with a mechanical whine. 5 out of 5. James stood slowly, thumbed the bolt open, and let the casing ping to the floor. The applause wasn't loud, but it was real. Later, in the cadet med bay, James sat with a pack of ice balanced across his shoulder. Vexel stood nearby, still visibly shaken. "Are you injured?" "Shoulder took a beating," James muttered. "That much recoil, that many times wasn't built for it back to back. I'll be sore a week." "You did not complain." "I wasn't asked." Vexel's spots dimmed with what James had learned to recognize as worry. "This weapon hurts you every time you use it?" "If you're not careful, yeah." "And you just tolerate that?" James shrugged slowly, winced, then adjusted the ice. "We're used to tools that bite back." The next morning, Professor Lectrin arrived late to class. He looked pale. His usual orb form pulsed erratically, his ambient light flickering like a faulty diode. He shuffled datapads onto the lectern, glanced up at the assembled cadets, then cleared his throat through his vocalizer. "Today's lesson is cancelled." A shocked murmur ran through the class. Instead, Lectrin loaded something into the hollow table. The display changed to footage ancient, human, silent. It showed trenches, dirt, soldiers. Then snipers. Dozens of them, camouflaged, hidden, and always the same pattern. One shot, then stillness. Lectrin didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "We may have misclassified Terran warfare." Someone in the back whispered, "Understatement of the cycle." By the end of the week, 4 cadets had asked James for shooting lessons. He refused the first 2. The third was Vexel. The fourth was Kren, whose hands trembled even holding the unloaded rifle. "You'll get used to it," James told them. "But it explodes," Kren whispered. "In your hands. Only if you don't respect it." They practiced slowly. Dry fire first, then stances. James corrected their posture, adjusted their breathing, warned them about the recoil. When Vexel took his first shot live, single round, he fell backward. James caught him before he hit the ground. "That," James said, "is what gravity can't teach you." Vexel grinned, still flat on his back. "It punched me." James offered him a hand. "Now you know why we aim before pulling the trigger." One night, a message came. Encrypted, not from the Citadel network. James read it twice before letting himself exhale. Would Earth be open to a munitions consultancy agreement? Signed, Strategic Council, Galactic Defense Corps. He tapped the rifle case under his bunk, opened it, ran a hand along the barrel like one might check a sleeping pet. Then he pulled out a datapad and opened a spreadsheet labeled Supply Chain, Terran Ballistics. Brass casings, gun oil, machined parts, shipping weight estimates. He smiled faintly. Still works. James Halley's name wasn't whispered anymore. It was spoken softly, but with weight, like someone had discovered the quiet cadet in the back row had been carrying around a dormant weapon and a map the whole time. By the end of the second cycle, nearly half the advanced combat theory students had downloaded digital copies of the Terran Ballistics Primer from the archival servers. Most of them didn't understand half of it. Some didn't even understand what gravity drop meant. But they read it. More than that, they started adjusting simulations for non-energy anomalies. It was the polite way of saying bullets might be involved. James found his schedule increasingly crowded. He hadn't volunteered to teach, but the instructors had made a quiet exception, optional enrichment, they called it, open to those who wanted to explore archaic combat tactics. Vexel, naturally, was first to sign up. "I do not believe this is archaic," the Polari said one morning, resting an elbow on the firing bench and squinting through the borrowed scope. "I believe it's hidden." "You're not wrong," James muttered, adjusting the bipod. "Most of our gear got overlooked because it doesn't glow or hum, but it still ends fights." Because it's lethal? Because it's patient. That day, James taught them about zeroing optics. Most of the aliens didn't have reflexes tuned for it. Their species had evolved with different sensory priorities: heat, light, magnetic flux. But aiming, real aiming, required something else. It required waiting, breathing. Kren didn't get it. He flinched every time he exhaled. His limbs were too jumpy. Vexel, however, was another matter. He had no eyelids, but he didn't blink. His pulse rate was slow, and his gills barely moved when he focused. James noticed that the rifle barely shifted. When he fired, he absorbed the recoil with surprising grace. The first time he hit center mass at 200 meters, he stood silently, blinking at the digital marker. "I thought I missed." James nodded. "That's what makes it dangerous." The Citadel cafeteria was not built for small talk. Most cadets used the time to review reports, analyze drone performance, or interface directly with virtual combat scenarios while they ingested nutrients. James sat with Vexel, as always, chewing actual food. Vexel, in turn, consumed a pulpy biogel that smelled faintly of kelp and chlorine. No one else joined them. Until Varric did. The Oligari dropped his tray onto the table, stared across at James, and said, "I want to try again." James raised an eyebrow. "Try what?" "The challenge. A different one. Not drones, live maneuver, no weapons, just tactics." Vexel narrowed his eyes. "You want to spar?" "Not physically," Varric said. "A combat puzzle. Terrain navigation. You bring your slug thrower. I bring a scout caster. We hunt. First to tag the other wins." James stabbed a bite of food with his fork. You want to play hide and seek? I want to know if that thing works in motion. James nodded slowly. All right. Varric grinned. Tomorrow, Dome 6, 0800. No observers. The next morning, the sim dome sealed with a hiss and dropped into terrain mode. Rolling hills, sparse tree cover, artificial fog. Both combatants wore training vests calibrated to register kinetic or energy impact non-lethal, but honest. James took the high ground early, moving in low stances, avoiding ridgelines. He spent 15 minutes watching wind data scroll across his wristband before even looking through the scope. Varric moved like a flare. The autocaster blipped softly every few seconds, scanning the area. It was fast, sleek, tuned to short bursts and movement response. But it was loud, digitally loud. Every emission left a ripple. James counted 12 minutes between sightings. He didn't fire. Let him pass. At the 28-minute mark, Varric sprinted between two boulders. James was already dialed in. The crack of the M40 echoed once across the fake hills. Both vests beeped. James's stayed steady. Varric's pulsed red, high on the right shoulder. When they met at the rendezvous point, Varric looked down at his vest, then at James. He didn't speak right away. You could have hit my core, he said finally. James unslung the rifle. Wasn't necessary. You didn't move for 20 minutes. Didn't need to. Varric gave a soft, frustrated laugh. That's insane. No, it's the job. Then, something unexpected happened. Varric stepped forward, extended a hand, 2 fingers curved in the Oligari gesture of respect. James shook it. In class that afternoon, Lectrin's lecture took an unexpected turn. Today's topic is stealth asymmetry, the professor announced. Specifically, non-energy signatures and their potential for battlefield misdirection. A dozen heads turned toward James. He didn't look up from his notes. Lectrin loaded a holo recording onto the central dome. It showed thermal imaging, dozens of figures moving across a simulated combat zone. Most glowed. One did not. It lay prone on a ridge, motionless, only visible when highlighted. This is Cadet Halley, during his previous simulation, Lectrin said. Note the lack of signature. No energy emissions, no heat bloom. The targeting AIs could not detect him. A Uran cadet raised a limb. But how? His weapon uses combustion, doesn't it? Yes, Lectrin said, pausing. But only momentarily, and with baffling efficiency. Minimal waste heat, no digital exhaust. James added without looking up, and no tracking beacon, which most energy weapons broadcast by default. The Uran made a confused chuffing noise. But that's dangerous. James nodded. I know. That night, his shoulder flared again. It had never fully healed. The repeated recoil, especially prone, on uneven surfaces, had strained his deltoid. He'd pushed too hard after the shootout with Varric, then stressed it further during training. He reported to the medbay. The attending physician, a squat parg named Dovo, shook his head while scanning. You humans have baffling ideas of rest, Dovo muttered. This is a class 2 muscle strain. You should have reported this earlier. I thought it was just bruised. It was bruised, then you used it. Now it's torn. Dovo applied a subdermal regenerative patch, cold and numbing. You're lucky we caught it before it worsened. No field drills for 10 days. Understood? James frowned. I can still... No, Dovo snapped. That arm doesn't lift anything heavier than a stylus until I say so. He left with his arm in a soft brace, which felt far more humiliating than it looked. When Vexel saw it later, he frowned. Is this permanent? 2 weeks, give or take, I'll be fine. You should have said something. James looked out the corridor window. The Citadel's orbital sunrise bathed the horizon in synthetic gold. I didn't want to lose momentum. You didn't. 5 days later, a delegation from the Tactical Review Board arrived. They weren't professors. They weren't even military. They wore diplomatic badges and carried sealed tablets. One of them, an old Urelian with translucent skin, asked James to repeat the first drone shot, exactly as before. James hesitated. I'm not cleared for shoulder recoil yet. The Urelian frowned. Then we'll wait. No, James said. I can still show you something. He set up the M40 on a stand, adjusted the stabilizers to zero out vertical motion, and let Vexel take the shot under supervision. The drone dropped again. Clean. Center mass. The Eurelian took notes. Then asked quietly, "Does your world manufacture these in quantity?" James didn't smile. Not yet. At the next simulation review, the cadets found something strange. The newest battlefield AI protocols had been updated to flag ballistic ghost signatures as potential threats. An entire subroutine now existed, named Halley Proximity Type 3. Vexel read the change log and blinked slowly. "They've added you to the baseline." James closed his tablet. Good. It was late in the cycle when the Citadel's curriculum committee made their decision. Officially, it was called Elective Module 118D, Kinetic Warfare and Analog Ballistics. Unofficially, everyone just called it Halley's class. James wasn't listed as the instructor. He wasn't ranked high enough. But every cadet who signed up 18 in the first rotation knew who stood at the firing line, showing them how to breathe. His shoulder had healed slower than he wanted. Dovo, the Citadel medic, had enforced a strict regimen. No firing for 2 weeks, daily mobility checks, manual resistance exercises, no shortcuts. "It's muscle tissue, not metal," Dovo said as he scanned James's shoulder joint for the 5th time. "You tear it again and I won't patch it. You'll wear a sling for the rest of your life and teach with one arm." James grunted. "Got it." "Say it." "I got it." Only after Dovo ran a final diagnostic, confirming scar tissue had reformed and full rotation was back, did he approve light training. But no prone firing, not yet. 2 more days, Dovo said. James took those days to rest. Clean the rifle, re-zero the scope, rewrite the curriculum plan for the elective. He didn't need to be cleared for full combat to teach someone how to wait. The first real moment came when Vexel asked about sniping in cities. They were alone in the simulation chamber, working with abstract terrain. James had set up mock skylines and randomized thermal drift. Vexel studied the layout with quiet intensity. "How do you shoot between buildings?" the Polari asked. "There are so many variables. Heat blooming from windows, drafts, refraction." "You plan ahead," James said, "and then you plan what happens when the plan falls apart." Vexel blinked. "Is that a proverb?" "It's a Tuesday." The shot they practiced was called a threader, passing a round between 2 narrow barriers to hit a third object beyond. James didn't expect Vexel to land it. Vexel did. By millimeters. The holographic drone spun, flared red, and collapsed. Vexel set the rifle down slowly. "That's the 3rd one this week." James nodded. "You're getting too good." "Are you worried I'll replace you?" "No, I'm worried you'll stop asking questions." Vexel's bioluminescent spots glowed faint blue, sincere admiration in Polari terms. "Never," he said. "Not about this." The shift didn't happen all at once, but it did happen. Cadets who once mocked James now waited after lectures to ask about spindrift and supersonic crack. Tactical exercises began, including kinetic ghost scenarios. Even the instructors started slipping projectile models into the war games. Some cadets failed the first time they tried firing. Not because they missed, but because they assumed they wouldn't. Kren, the nervous Korthon, dislocated his shoulder, firing prone with bad form. James caught it immediately, stabilized it, and walked him to medbay himself. Dovo tutted the whole way. "You're creating a medical trend, Halley." James didn't argue. But later, he returned to the range and redid the training protocols, new steps for bracing, recoil control, and muscular prep. No one else got hurt after that. On the 29th day of the cycle, a detachment from the Galactic Defense Council arrived. Their insignia bore no branch names, just the emblem of the whole united force, a solar ring around a spear. They requested a private demonstration. In the hangar, 3 observers stood back while James prepped the rifle. He'd reconditioned it with a fresh bore cleaning, tested the bolt twice, and checked the rounds himself. One of the counselors, short, furred, eyes like polished stone, asked why there was no scope readout. "It's glass," James said. "No telemetry?" "No." "And no aim correction software?" James shook his head. The counselor said, "Nothing more." The test drone this time was faster. Its shield had been retrofitted with kinetic deflection fields engineered specifically to absorb impact. Not enough to stop a bullet, in James's opinion, but he appreciated the effort. He lay prone, nestled into the mat, and watched the drone zigzag across the simulated canyon floor. He didn't fire immediately. Instead, He tracked it. The counselors shifted uncomfortably behind him. They were used to action, energy weapons that roared to life in half a second and solved problems by overwhelming force. This wasn't that. This was geometry, anticipation, a moment stretching to the edge of certainty. James squeezed the trigger. The crack was loud, clean, echoed against the hangar walls. The drone tumbled out of the air, in a sharp, jerking motion caught mid-climb. The counselor who had asked about telemetry tilted their head. "No signature," they murmured. "Not even a wake." The lead counselor, a tall reptilian figure in minimal dress, stepped forward. "What's the effective range of your weapon?" "About 1,000 yards," James said. "More if you're patient." "And the material cost?" James tapped the empty brass casing on the floor. "Less than an energy cell." They didn't ask any more questions. They just thanked him and left. That evening, a secure packet arrived on his tablet. The seal read, "Strategic Assessment and Integration Division Confidential." Inside was a breakdown. Earth's military exports had been reclassified, not as relics, not as historical curiosities, but as adaptive low-signature systems. A new designation, and a proposal. Earth would be invited to submit tactical advisors for upcoming war games. James closed the file slowly, then looked across the room to Vexel, who sat studying target drift models. "You ever think about visiting Earth?" Vexel looked up. "Why?" "We're going to need more instructors." The rifle had started to age. Not badly, but the M40 had seen more activity in the last 2 months than it had in years. James took it apart that night, piece by piece, under the soft light of his dorm's desk lamp. It smelled like oil and carbon, a good smell, familiar. He worked slowly, let his hands move the way they always had. When he finished, he wrapped the rifle in its cloth again. Ran one hand along the barrel. Not every weapon needed to evolve to be useful. Some just needed to be remembered. He set the casing from the last demonstration beside it on the shelf. Then leaned back in his chair, watching the soft flicker of artificial starlight drift across the ceiling. The Citadel had changed. Maybe not overnight, maybe not completely, but there were new questions now. New doubts in the old assumptions. That was enough. He whispered it to no one in particular, voice low and even. "Still works." And this time, the galaxy was listening,